an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Grace of Kings, chapters 50 and 51. It's the final chapter. Guys, Kuni Garu wins. I know that being a king takes maintenance. This isn't just a flat-out happy ending and then the story ends and that's it. But it's pretty close to a happy ending. And I'm very excited about it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Kyle for commissioning this entire book. Like, holy shit. This was a long-ass book, too. So this required some serious commitment, and I just want to acknowledge that your boy Kyle had your back. And by your back, I mean my back. Because, yeah, I was invested in this story. I really enjoyed all of the twists and turns. I really enjoyed how over-the-top certain parts of it are. And that over-the-topedness continues right up until the last moments. So, this friggin'... I have to admit, I did not see this coming. I did not think Kuni was just going to win. I thought, okay, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I thought that maybe him and Mata would be able to, like, set aside their differences and be able to team up again. I know that's stupid, and I know that I'm like a sweet summer child, but I just, as much as I do not like Mata, I still want him to have that satisfaction that he, like, dreamed of having. Does that make sense? Because of, like, what happened to his whole family being slaughtered. I still want him to wind up in a spot where he's, like, he feels like he finally accomplished what he set out to do. And the thing is, like, he becomes the hegemon, but he never seems to achieve that sort of satisfaction. Despite getting there, despite becoming, like, the ruler of everything and crushing most of his enemies, it never feels like he gets to a place where he's like, okay, I did it. I'm proud of myself. He has, like, a moment of almost feeling proud and like he did it, and then somebody will say something that gets in his head. Or somebody will prove to not be the exact kind of honorable that he wanted. And as much as I don't like Mata, there is something about how much time was invested in his story that made me get invested despite myself. And I just really don't... I feel kind of bad for him that he never got to this place, because it's entirely on him. I'm not trying to say that anybody else prevented him from ever getting that satisfaction. I'm saying that he never grew enough to get to that place himself. And I was hoping that somehow, being friends with Kuni again, that he would be able to ascend beyond his current understanding of the world and his current desires for kind of petty revenges when it comes right down to it. He was very childish about a lot of things. I just wanted Mata to grow up. So I was holding out until the end that maybe he'd be able to do that, especially because Kuni and him signed this peace accord I was like, maybe that's the first step. Maybe we are going to get to have this like period of peace, and Mata will have time to reflect, and he'll start to realize that he handled a lot of things the wrong way, and that he was childish, and that he needs to revisit some of the assumptions that he made or the standards that he held for people. But it never gets there. And honestly, that's fair. Honestly, not everybody grows up. Not everybody manages to defeat their patterns and learn how to live in a way that is like intelligent and deliberate and not reactive to, I don't even want to say reactive, but not just simply like believing in the same ideology that you did when you were a kid. Not everybody gets there. And Mata shows no indication whatsoever that even if this period of peace had been maintained, that he'd ever really rethink the way that he handled anything. His beliefs are absolute, and he seems pretty set in his ways. And the fact that he goes out in the end the way that he does is so completely in character with him. Up to the very end, is going hard, going all out, and going like highest stakes possible. And I don't think a period of peace would have agreed with him, to be honest. You know, I'm over here talking about like, well, maybe peace, and he would be like reflect. But honestly, I think they'd sign a peace accord, and then somehow Mata would find himself embroiled in another war or conflict of some kind, because he is just the kind of person that needs that in his life to feel like he is alive. So I'm not ashamed to say that I had this desire, and I recognize that it was like never going to happen. But the friendship that he and Kuni had for a short period was so moving and so beautiful that it was tragic to me that we had to say goodbye to it forever. And the fact that he was willing to sign these peace accords with Kuni at all showed enough growth that it got my hopes up, because otherwise I feel like he would never have considered this years earlier, you know? So I flattered him that this was a real sign of him growing as a person. But really, it might have just been him being really tired, you know? I don't know. I'm going to read you how this goes, because we have like him continuing to try and press Kuni into like fighting him. I read the beginning of this chapter live on the last episode, and it basically cuts from him going out on these like kites the way that he does to challenge Kuni, who of course is never going to fight Mata. Like, just the fact that he keeps on doing this and feels like he's proving a point because Mata won't, or that Kuni won't fight him, and he's like, see, everybody knows what a coward you are. No, everybody knows that he has some goddamn common sense, Mata. Nobody thinks that you should take a fight that you know for a fact you are going to lose simply because your honor dictates it, except for you and like 3 other people. Rat, for one. But to continue this war would only harm the people of Dara. I cannot conquer Kakru, and you cannot move out of it. Can we agree to divide the world in half? All that is south of the Liru and Sonaru rivers will belong forever to you, and all the rest to me. The road both of us have traveled is full of regrets. I would like to call you brother again. Mata stared at Kuni, and Kuni's face was full of pain. Mata felt a surge of something akin to compassion. Perhaps honor still resided in the hearts of all men, just hidden more deeply in some than in others. He raised his cup to Kuni. Brother. So, again, I wanted to believe that that moment was some real growth. But the fact that it's described by the author the way that it is, something akin to compassion. The author does not say he was suddenly moved by compassion. The author says it was something like that. It was in the family. It was in that general neighborhood. Makes me think that I should not put as much stock in that one moment as I want to. The reunion of the Garu family was bittersweet. So this is an interesting thing that, now knowing that there are other books, I feel like this is probably going to be a big part of any continuing story. I really, really enjoyed this being brought up again. And as much as I don't want this kind of drama, I hesitate to use that word because I feel like the word drama is used to belittle things that are actually genuine, valid concerns. But I'm saying drama because it's sort of small scale. But the being reunited with Gia and her having this sort of weird, distant relationship with Kuni now, and him having a son that he has named as his heir that is not one of her kids, is, I don't want to say it's a slap in the face, but it feels like a little bit of a slap in the face. Do you know what I'm saying? Oh, Kyle's here. Hi, Kyle. Sorry for being late. Didn't get any Twitter notifications. Oh, no. Did I not send the thing out? Oh, I didn't. I entered it and I never pressed send. I'm sorry, Kyle. This is my 4th recording of the day and I have another one later tonight. So I am just a little overtired, I think. But this is something that I feel like is obviously going to be a huge issue later on down the line. That I feel like is... So Kyle says Phiro, is that how you say it? Phiro isn't the heir. His name refers to a poem about an heir. Yeah, it does. And that's the point. I think that's them saying that is his heir without actually announcing it yet. I don't know. There's I'm going to read this thing. I'm trying to find the exact spot because we have the Luanzia moment, but I want to read the part about Gia where she's like, I wish that I could find this. I should have highlighted it, but I totally thought I would remember. Here it is. Oh no, this is about Jin and Risana when they meet up, which I did really like. This is a pretty sneaky little thing that they decide to do. Yeah, I can't find the spot, but there's a part where they talk about the fact that the name signifies a pearl in the hand, and that it comes from a poem about the heir to some guy's, I don't know if it's his fortune or his estate or what, but it's kind of a I think hint, and that's what makes Gia sort of bitter. It says that she has a bitter smile. And I don't think that she's missing, if that isn't the significance of choosing that name, I think they should not have chosen that name, because it definitely gives a certain impression in my eyes. But all right, we'll get to that because I can't find that spot, and apparently it's a little further on. They have signed this peace treaty, but Luanzia is, he has his magical book that he was given by one of the gods, and it opens on its own and begins to tell a story about 2 Krubans who vied for lordship, and they were each, had different remora attached to them, living off of them the way that they do. Just as the red Kruben settled down for rest, a remora attached to him whispered to his host, "Finish him, finish him, finish him. When his eyes are closed and his mind deep in slumber, stab him through the heart with your horn. Finish him, finish him, finish him." "What kind of counsel is this?" said the Red Cruben. "Such a path is neither fair nor just. I have come to admire him after so many days of fighting." "I'm attached to you," said the Remora. "I live off the detritus that drifts from your maw after you feed. I have traveled the four seas only by dint of your power. If you win, I'll have more to eat, and perhaps I'll puff up and show off my colorful fins to the other fish. But if you lose, I'll just find another great fish to attach to. Though I'll benefit from your victory, I'll not share your dishonor. The memory of the sea is rarely kind to creatures who blame their moral failing on those who but serve and advise at their pleasure." "So you admit that you risk nothing, and I everything. Why should I listen to you?" "Because I live so low, hanging from your belly, my duty isn't to be your conscience, but to think thoughts you dare not think, devise plans you dare not utter. When you find a great Cruben, a lord of the sea, whose scales are shiny, whose hide is smooth, whose muscles bulge with vigor and health, you may be sure that you'll find a great many remoras attached to him gorged on filth. A Cruben whose remoras are afraid to get dirty will not live long or find victory." And the Red Cruben listened to the remora and became the lord of the four seas. All right, so I'm going to break this down a little bit, because I'm not sure that I am entirely understanding the lesson here. Because I live so low, hanging from your belly, my duty isn't to be your conscience, but to think thoughts you dare not think, devise plans you dare not utter. Now, I understand that in generalities, what that means is just basically like somebody has to kind of be the one that's willing to do things that are sort of unthinkable if you are more of a honorable person who's worried about your reputation. I get that kind of person is necessary to somebody in Kuni's position. But when he says, when you find a great Cruben, a lord of the sea whose scales are shiny, yada, 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 you may be sure that you'll find a great many remoras attached to him. A Cruben whose remoras are afraid to get dirty will not live long or find victory. Basically, I have to think about these things because my welfare depends on you being willing to do questionable things that are in ethical sort of gray areas. But I don't really understand why this argument sways the Cruben. Does that make sense? I don't really basically the remora is just like, well, you know, I profit if you do this, and you're gonna need, like, it just basically comes down to, it sounds like, if you see somebody else who's super powerful, you can bet that there are other remoras attached to them who are doing the same things that I'm doing, or suggesting the same things that I'm suggesting, I guess. Which just seems like not really a reason. It just seems like a fact. And I don't know. He remembered the promise he made to his father and felt again the restlessness in his soul. The more perfect the ideals, the less ideal the methods. That's a really interesting assertion. And I am not sure if that actually rings true for me in terms of this parable that we just read. This is probably the first time in this book that there has been that sort of story, and I haven't bought it. Like, it just doesn't feel profound or like it's teaching anything to me. I don't know. It just doesn't connect, and I'm not really sure what it is, but maybe it's just the fact that I hate to see Kuni break his word. And I understand that this is what gets him the victory, and I really do think he's better for the people, of course, than Mata is. But it is a pretty brutal thing to do. And when it comes right down to it, it's just about What is better for the people? And are you willing to sacrifice your own reputation to do what you think is right for everybody? Kind of like, what's her name did, the woman who was captured and let herself go down in infamy instead of doing the right thing, the quote, right thing, and ruining things for her people in the future. But I don't really see this little story demonstrating that very well. Anyway, though, apparently it strikes something in Luan, because Luan goes and talks to Kuni and is like, we really need to attack. And Kuni is obviously not on this page right now. Like, when Luan suggests this, Kuni is just like, oh my God, dude, I am really tired. I signed this fucking treaty not just because I think it'll do everybody else good, but because I myself am personally exhausted, and we have been doing this for like 8 years now at this point. Like, can we not? And Luan is just like, I mean, if you want, we don't have to, but I think you're ruining a golden opportunity to like fix everything. Then I'll be remembered by history as a great betrayer. Mata's accusation against me will be carved in stone, made true by my own act. What you counsel is against all the laws of war. I will have no honor left. The judgment of history cannot be ascertained from up close. You see the condemnation of the people of this generation, but you cannot foresee how their descendants will view your deeds in the future. If you do not attack now and end this war, the killing will never stop. In another 10 years or 20, Dasu and Kakru will face against each other on the battlefield. Blood will again stain the Liru River, and the people of Dara will again suffer and die. You will have sacrificed the lives of the people for personal honor. An empty word, Luan said. That seems to me a most selfish act. Is there no room for mercy? No sympathy among gods or men? Mercy for your foes, my king, is the same as cruelty to your friends. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that something that Mata said at one point? I feel like he did. I don't really care for the fact that Luan is the one that's like coming out here and quoting Mata shit to Kuni. Kyle says, yep. Okay. I was like, that feels very familiar. And it just seems too absolutist. I am concerned, like, I want Kuni to be the one, I really do, but the way that this all goes down, I'm really worried that he's undermining himself by handling it all this way, and that Luan counseling him with words that Mata used, and Kuni listening to him, is like an early indicator of the fact that Kuni is losing his way a little bit. And I don't want that to be true, but I kind of feel like it might be. I want Kuni to be good at this. I want the kingship to be him getting to take advantage of every skill that he has, that we know he has. He is so good at so many things. And I want him to be able to exercise those muscles in a real way beyond warfare, but just in terms of counseling and growing an empire. So in that respect, I am behind this whole thing, but I really am worried about the way that Luan comes to these decisions. And the way that Kuni listens. I don't know. A knife is not malicious merely because it is sharp. A plot is not evil merely because it is effective. That's not what anybody's saying. Nobody is saying that a plot would be evil because it's effective. They're saying a plot would be evil because you made a promise. And I don't know. Luan, normally I trust your judgment on things pretty well, but you got me really side-eyeing you in these chapters. And then he says, the grace of kings is not the same as the morals governing individuals. Now, okay, I have to admit, I do agree with that one. I don't like to. I never like to think that like some people are outside of the same rules of ethics and morals that regular people are in. Like, I feel like that's a real slippery slope from just being like, I'm too important to follow rules at all. Or, you know, basically like you get into like the too big to fail, too powerful to be prosecuted kind of thing. However, I do really believe that when you are a leader, you have to operate by a different set of morals and ethics than the average person, because nothing is going to be as simple and black and white and small scale as anybody's personal beliefs or actions as an individual. It's part of why, like, I recognize people being angry at some, like, you know, especially Obama, for example, for being held up as a sort of like example of really great, pure leadership when he engaged in a lot of acts of war that were outright crimes, right? Like, he did a lot of things that are highly questionable. But at the same time, I never ever feel comfortable with just being like, well, that was the wrong thing to do, because I really believe that there is a lot of information out there that I'm not privy to. And that if you are a world leader, there are so many things to take into account that I am never confident I wouldn't come to the same conclusion if I had all the same information that he came to. And that something maybe from our perspective as citizens can look despicable. But if I had the rest of the information, I might feel very differently about that. And that's just something that I've always sort of struggled with, the idea of it. So in that respect, I get what Luana's saying. I don't even disagree. I just feel like he's trying to present a sort of a straw man rather than addressing Kuni's actual concerns about the validity of doing something like this. So Mata finds out that Kuni has betrayed him and is deeply grieved by it. It's like, honestly, one of the few times that I've genuinely felt bad for Mata, because I think that he kind of missed being friends with Kuni, and he's sort of like, I think he might be tired as well. I don't know. He tore the treaty in his hands into pieces, scattering them like moths in the chill wind of late autumn. So depressing. So they get into their formations and they start up all over again. Theka, Kuni, and Jin's armies converged and surrounded the hill like the hoops of a barrel. Jin Mazochi was appointed commander-in-chief. This would be her masterpiece, her greatest battle. So they really push it, and there starts to be like this horrific snowstorm that is freezing people to death, freezing horses to death. They're starving out on and yet none of the men who are fighting for Mata are even like thinking about retreating, because to them, the fact that Kuni broke his word is something that simply cannot be let go and forgiven. They're not going to turn around and surrender after going through all of this to somebody who broke their promise like that, which I kind of get. Meanwhile, Jin is really feeling steadfast, like they need to stay the course and finish the job. But Kuni is having some pangs from his conscience. Shall I leave behind as many widows and orphans as Mapidere at the price of my victory? Even if we win, I will have lost the hearts of the people. Jin sighed. Kuni's streak of essential kindness was not always militarily convenient, but it was why she served him. Then what do you propose? We can hardly offer a truce again. Lady Risana has an idea. So, this is interesting because I really actually liked this a lot. Jin Mazati is a woman who is in command of this huge army, is very like tactically talented, gifted at fighting, all of this stuff. And so she is occupying this position that is traditionally male and is basically like just trying to prove I can do as good a job as any man at this, in fact, better. But Risana points out to her a couple times, we have involved a lot of women in the fight and, talked about having them fly some of the airships and all of these different things, which has all worked out. And yet they are treated not like regular troops. They're treated like backup that we use when we don't have real soldiers. And Jin sort of like stops short as she realizes that's exactly true. She doesn't seem to really think of them as real soldiers. And this is something that I think is interesting that is included in the story at all. That even somebody who has spent her entire life trying to overcome the sexism and misogyny of her culture, if she manages to attain something that most women do not, it's easy for her to lose track of the fact that other women are still fighting this same fight and maybe are doing it in a different way, but their fight is still just as valid as hers was, and that she needs to like keep an eye out for them as well. And I love this, that Jin is a woman in charge, and yet she's like squandering these troops that could be really valuable and useful. And I just thought that was a really interesting little, like, sort of side conversation that her and Risana have. Though Jin respected Risana's wisdom, she was tired and tense, and Risana's words seemed too obscure. This isn't a matter of parlor tricks and seduction. Ah, Marshal, though you have added women to your army, have you ever thought of them as real soldiers? After she explained her plan, Jin was thoughtful. She paced back and forth in the tent as Kuni and Risana watched. Finally, she looked up. If this doesn't work, you will have hardened Mata's men so that their resistance will be even more fierce. But it's worth a try. The king will have to speak to them directly. So, she goes and summons a bunch of different women, and they walk out in a phalanx formation and begin to sing. And the next chapter starts, tonight there was no attack from Mazati. In fact, Matazindu's scouts reported that the Dasu army had pulled back half a mile, leaving an empty no-man's land around the hill. Just before morning, women's voices, carried by the wind, woke Mata in his tent. Is it snow that I see falling in the valley? Is it rain that flows over the faces of the children? Oh, my sorrow is great. It is not snow that covers the floor of the valley. It is not rain that washes the faces of the children. Oh, my sorrow is great. Chrysanthemum petals have filled the floor of the valley. Tears have soaked the faces of the children. Oh, my sorrow is great. The warriors, they have died like falling chrysanthemum blossoms. My son, oh my son, he is not coming home from battle. So, all of these men from Mata's side begin to sing this song with them. This is a really well-known Kakru song, evidently. And they're basically trying to tug at these guys' heartstrings and sort of be like, don't you wish this was over? Don't you want to, like, move past this war and this hardship and this sadness and go home and live peacefully again? Men emerged from the tents around Mata in the pre-dawn darkness. Some wiped their eyes. Some began to sing. A few cried openly. The women have been singing non-stop for hours, said Rotho Miro. The commanders told the soldiers to plug up their ears with wax, but they did not obey. Some of the men have walked down to meet the women, looking for those from their home villages to ask for news about their families. Should we order an attack? This tactic is beneath contempt. Mata shook his head. It's all right. Kuni has already taken the soldiers' hearts. It's too late now. So he goes to his tent, and he's talking to Mira, and he gets up and says to her, like he has his back to her, Kuni is generous with prisoners. When you're captured, pretend that I've been really, really cruel to you, and he will feel bad about how you've been mistreated, and he'll treat you really well. And she says, all your life you think everyone betrays you in the end, said Mira, but it's not true. Not true. Mira's voice grew faint as she neared the end of her speech. Mata, who was facing away from her, turned around as her voice faded to a whisper. He rushed to her as she collapsed. Her hand held on to the handle of a slim dagger made of bone. The blade of Kruben's thorn was plunged deep into her heart. Mata's howl could be heard for miles. It mixed with the singing voices of the men and women of Kakru, and all who heard it shivered involuntarily. So, I am so confused by this. Listen, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I don't get it. I don't understand Mira, pretty much, is really what this comes down to. I appreciate her deciding I'm not going to kill you because somebody is just trying to use me as a weapon, and I would be killing you because they told me to, and I'm not interested in just being a pawn. I really get that. But as far as her, eventually sort of caring about Mata and deciding that she's going to, sleep with him and be immortalizing all of his works with her embroidery, all of this, I do not understand what she sees in him or her motivation for doing a lot of this. And this moment, she says something about, she says the thing about you think everybody betrays you in the end, and that's not true. But why does she have to kill herself rather than just accept an arrangement once the war is over? How would that be betraying him? It would not. It would simply be her moving on after Mata is dead. She doesn't need to, that's not... I just feel like that was unnecessary. I don't think it helps anything. I don't think it puts Mata in a particularly great frame of mind. I just don't understand why she handled most of what she did the way she did. And I find her really puzzling. I feel like she's the only character that has had a significant number of POV chapters that I have not gotten to really connect with and understand. There have been moments where I have, and then they go away. So I'm curious if anybody listening to this has feelings on this, on why she did it. But I did not care for this moment. It felt like it was put in simply because we wanted this tragic all or nothing ending for Mata. And not because it actually made sense for her to make this choice. So yeah, I don't know. It was just super weird to me, and it was unexpected, and it was a thing that felt like it was supposed to be really dramatic and oh my God, I can't believe. And it was oh my God, I can't believe, but not with that was so heart-wrenching and sweet and bittersweet and whatever. It was, oh my God, I can't believe because I don't get what? And then I just got distracted and went back and reread those couple of pages thinking that I must have missed something or misunderstood something. And the more I read it, the more I was I don't see how I can interpret this any other way, to be honest. Kyle is saying he agrees. Okay. That makes me feel a little bit better. And I'm just curious about this. Ratho, gather all the riders who still wish to follow me. We will break through the encirclement. So what follows is basically, it amounts to Mata's last stand. And him and a bunch of his men have another like wolf's paw sort of experience where they get completely wrapped up in the bloodlust and start to take down men at a rate that is like totally unnatural for the number of people that they have. However, there is a moment of them getting lost in the fog, which I am sure has to do with Rosanna. And one of these old men that they run into, he asks for directions, and the guy resents Mata because both of his sons died fighting for this guy. And when Mata asks which way he should go to get to Karusa, this dude sends him in like the total wrong direction. And Mata's and his horse and all of his men's horses get stuck in the mud and just wind up being sitting ducks for a little while. They plowed down the hill into the thicket of Dasu soldiers, and this is the final moment after they are able to like get free of that whole thing and realize like this is it. They rode straight at the figure of the Dasu commander, whose eyes widened in fear. But before he could retreat, Mata split him in half from shoulder to belly with one swing of Nauroena. Mata's men cheered, and the Dasu soldiers scattered like snowflakes in the wind. As Mata continued south, he counted the men around him. 26. They'd only lost 2 men. And they do this while they're like, you know, in this moment, they killed quite a few. So to have only lost 2 is like unthinkable. All of the riders felt as if they had become gods themselves. Finally, they arrived at the sea. So he tries to get his horse to leave without him. And I love this. His horse is not having any of it. Horse is like, bitch, you picked me for a reason. And you know that I'm not going to fucking leave. So don't insult my ass. Don't insult my horse ass. I'm sorry, old friend. I was wrong to ask you to do something I would not do myself. You're indeed well matched to me, even unto death. He turned to face his men, his face full of sorrow. When I left Tunoa with my uncle and came to the big island, 800 young men followed me, their heads full of dreams of glory. Yet today, if I return, I will return alone without even their bones. How can I face their fathers, mothers, wives, sisters, and children? I cannot go home again. He stood with his men on the beach, Refiroa by his side, and they watched as the men of Dasu approached. So, this is the final battle, and they put up quite a fight, and in the end, Mata kills himself, and he does it in the hopes that Rat will take his body to Kuni and get himself a reward, because Kuni has offered a countship. Is that how you would say that? A count? I'm not sure what you would call the actual like title. But he has offered that as a reward. And Mata is trying to do his most faithful soldier a favor. And Rat is kind of doing the same thing as Refiroa. And it's just like, bitch, do you really think that I am about to profit off of your death? And he kills himself also. And poor DeFiro is watching as his brother kills himself. And I really felt for him in this moment. Like this was the saddest one for me. I wanted Rat and DeFiro to go off and have their own separate adventures, being loyal to different kings, and then be able to like rejoin together and share their adventures with one another and live under whomever wound up winning, and that there would be a sort of recognition from whoever won that they were both there from the very beginning, and the fact that they're still alive is like genuinely a bit of a miracle. But Rat admires Mata too much, and he could not continue on after Mata decided to sacrifice himself like that. And it ends that section. The men of Dasu rushed to grab a piece of Matazindu's body and claim the reward. He was torn limb from limb, and ultimately Kuni Garu had to award 5 soldiers who each presented a piece of Matazindu's body. That is fucking grisly. He gets sewn together for his funeral, and Kuni has this huge, elaborate funeral at which he cries like harder than anybody. It's obvious to everybody that he did not want this to go the way that he did. It's not like he's sorry to have won, but the sacrifice is severe. And he gives this speech, which I won't get into. I'm running out of time already. But it's really moving. You swept through the world in a tempest of gold. My brother, there will never be another like you in these islands. Which he is not wrong. So I liked that. And then we have this weird moment when Mata's body is about to be lowered into the ground. And all of a sudden, all of these ravens appear. And falcons. And wolves come up out of the ground, and they all like get into formation basically around the body, and then a storm rises up and clouds of dust are like, rising from the ground because of all this wind, and nobody can see. And then all of a sudden, when it all goes away, Mata's body is gone. And at that moment, Kogo decides to seize on this because he is a smarty who knows that you need to set in people's minds what this actually meant before it starts to take on its own life. How auspicious! The gods of Dara have together welcomed the hegemon into another realm. We who are left are witnessing the start of a new era of harmonious peace. And everybody sort of is like, all right, if that's the way you want to play this, you know what? I can do that. Like, they all seem to be really aware that this is a conscious choice, that they're going to go with this interpretation. And they go with it. And we have, later on, a conversation between the gods in which they lament the fact that they intended this showing to basically be an assurance that things were not resolved, that things were still split between two sides, and that there is conflict yet to come. And that they either purposely or accidentally misinterpreted it. A few of them find very frustrating. And I thought that this was so funny. Just the fact that they're trying so bad to get a point across, but they have to choose how they communicate in this way. And I'm like, it's not like you guys can't manifest as people and just talk. How about you just show up and but that's not how they work. I suggested Fithaweo's wolves face off against Kiji's falcons so that the mortals wouldn't get the mistaken impression that Kiji had forgiven Matazindu, the defiler of Mapidere's tomb, and also the greatest warrior of Dara. But your plan went wrong, Fithaweo said. That Kogoyelu twisted everything and made it appear as if we were all there to show support for Kuni Garu. And everyone listened to him, lamented Kana. Can't people think for themselves? Our careful signs will be recorded in the annals of Dara only as the misreading of one man, said Fithaweo. I enjoyed this a great deal. The frustration of the gods. So then we have everybody sort of wrapping everything up and establishing their positions. And we have a really weird thing where Kogo is accused of having basically embezzled. And I'm like, Kogo is a fucking smarty. There's no way he's embezzling. And if he was, there's no way he's getting fucking caught. This is nonsense. I was like, I thought for sure that he had been set up. But what it turns out to be is that he seems like we hear about this later from Luan Zia, that he is afraid, Kogo is afraid, that now that Kuni is more settled, he isn't going to appreciate having people around him that like know about his weaknesses, and basically made himself look like a fool on purpose in order to get Kuni off his guard, which I find really weird and like a reading of Kuni that's like kind of insulting and doesn't feel like it's really based on anything except for the fact that kings in general tend to be paranoid. And I don't feel like Kuni did anything to warrant this. Let's see. Do you think... Oh, yeah. Jin says, you think Kuni is sending me to Gan to separate me from officers loyal to me? That's one interpretation. But he also told me I would be allowed to wear my sword to court, and an honor not even allowed to men who have followed him far longer. And I did not refuse the honor. I do know that, and this is Luan here, I do know that power changes how a man sees his friends. Kogo understood this before any of us, and he wisely chose to allay Kuni's suspicions by acting the fool. Had he not sullied his own name deliberately, Kuni might have suspected him of trying to pry the hearts of the people away from his master. I just don't think that's... Like, it bums me out that Kuni thinks so little of... Or that Kogo thinks so little of Kuni at this point that he feels he needs to pull this kind of thing. But at the same time, it's not like Kuni is perfect. He did have, like, an episode where he almost left everything behind and just decided to be emperor after they took the city. So, you know. But Mazati is just kind of feeling the way that I am about this. I once had the chance to betray Kuni, but I refused it. The world is not only a world of brute force and heartless betrayals. Kuni has nothing to fear from me, and I likewise will not fear him. So then we have Jin dealing with some of the people that she has run into in her life, which is very satisfying, but also a little bit too bloody for me. She finds the guys who maimed all of those children in order to profit off of their begging, and she does exactly to them what they did to these children, which is really fucking horrifying. And has their eardrums pierced as well. Like, she takes it a step farther. A woman who fed her when she had nothing, she gives her 10,000 gold pieces. The couple that hurt her when they took her in, she even gives them money because she's like, look, you fucked up, but you were trying. And I hope that you'll learn to do better next time. It was not effective because it was you guys made bad decisions. But you also did try to help a kid who had nothing. So, and the guy that made her walk between his legs, crawl between his legs, she actually asks him to come up, and he's all afraid because he heard about what she did. And she's like, you know what? You taught me an important lesson that sometimes I need to put my ego aside. So let's have a drink. And I liked that a lot. So Kuni has one last night of drinking and hanging out with his friends in the way that he always has before he gets turned into Emperor Reagan, the reign of 4 placid seas, which to me feels like a really boring name, but I think anything that has the word placid in it, I'm not going to like. And they are sitting together and talking, and there's also the table next to them that is set for old friends who have passed away and can't be there with them. And I'm trying to find this because this is the spot where Gia, okay, yeah. She seemed to be trying to make up for lost time as she had been absent for years while Rasana was here to win their favor. Kuni had announced before the banquet that since Rasana's son, the young prince known as Hudotika, had also reached the age of reason, he would be formally named Firo, meaning pearl in the palm. Only a few who had studied the Anno classics in depth understood the obscure allusion. The Kokru patriot and poet Luru Sen had once written a poem celebrating the birth of a new prince. A son who carries on the legacy of his father is more precious than a pearl in the palm of a great king. Prince Timu's name, gentle ruler, had been an allusion to a son's love for his mother, but Firo's name seemed to indicate Kuni's thoughts on secession. No wonder Gia's face had been stony when the name was announced, though Rosanna had appeared completely oblivious. Rosanna was in trouble, and she didn't even know it. Rosanna thought Kuni's favor alone was enough, but she did not understand that the politics among the wives and children of the emperor would be far more deadly and intricate. So, like I said, I'm not really here for a lot of drama between women specifically. However, I am here for these women having to feel their way through a weird situation that they are not familiar with, because that seems fair. And yeah, I really think that seems like an indication that Kuni wants this kid to be his heir, which, as much as the other kids were born first, he doesn't know them very well, and they don't know him very well, and it's just sort of a whole weird situation. So let's see. Rosanna played the coconut lute, and Kuni, drunk and wistful, put down his kunikin and began to sing. The wind blows and clouds race across the sky. My power sways within the four placid seas. Now I am home, my friends and loved ones nearby. How brief is my respite, how rare this ease. Outside, the air was filled with dandelion seeds, drifting like snow in summer. I hear you decline the titles of Imperial Scholar and Grand Secretary, said Kogo as he sat down next to Luan. So what are you going to do? Oh, I haven't decided yet, Luan said. Maybe I'll try adapting the machinery and the mechanical Krubins into iron horses and oxen. And he goes on about this for a minute. But you have made up your mind not to stay around the court. There is a time to rise with the Krubin, and a time to withdraw. Kogo smiled and said no more. Luan looked over at Jin Mazotti. She looked back, smiled, and raised her cup. Luan saw only trust in her eyes, but he could not help but feel a chill as he listened to Kuni's song. The hunt is over. Luan sighed, raised his cup in turn, and drank. And that is the end. So, I'm really happy that Kuni won, but there's still so much, conflict remaining here. And it's always sad to see people who had previously been a team start to sort of turn on each other, or at least begin to trust each other less. And that's tragic, in a way. It's true. That's what happens. Once you don't have an outright clear enemy, you start to see enemies where there might not be, or they might be there. Things change and new enemies appear, or new interests arise. But it's very bittersweet, I feel like. Kyle says, rereading this along with the podcast has made me like it even more. The next book is a bit of a slower burn, but I think it's even better. Ooh, well, that's reassuring. That's cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed this a lot. It's very far outside of what I normally read. And at first I was so concerned because so many of the names are totally unfamiliar. There is a lot of geography and a lot of different pieces to keep track of. And I really at first was like, am I going to be able to comment on this with any sort of accuracy? But once you get absorbed in it, it starts to become a lot easier to follow. And I feel like this author had a really good grip on what he was trying to say, and of all of his characters as well, because I feel like something like this, you better have some really well-drawn characters if you're going to have so many of them. And he does. He did it. And Mata's end, as much as I was sad that he doesn't ever really get the glory, the long-lasting glory for his empire that he wanted, he does get the glory on a personal level for himself. And that was obviously also very important to him. So, in a way, I think Mata has to be satisfied with the way things went down. So, yeah. Kyle says, next book is called The Wall of Storms. I kind of like that. Wall of Storms. Interesting. Yeah, so, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for commissioning this entire book. This was, really compelling. Is the next book as long as this book was, or is it short? I feel like it's got to be longer, right? Yeah, he says longer. That's what I figure. I feel like authors very rarely write another book after creating a world that is shorter than the one before it. He says it's a thick boy. Oh, God. I believe thick has 2 C's, Kyle. All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again to Kyle. My apologies for not posting this to Twitter the way that I normally do, but I'm glad that you made it. And I will be seeing you all again soon, hopefully, with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.